Hi, and welcome to the Nutritional Boot Camp. This is Judy Green from Ron Green Wellness Coaching. I'm introducing you today to a bonus unit on your way to optimal nutrition. So 75% of all healthcare costs are preventable. You know, in Canada, we may have free healthcare, but our healthcare is in dire straits with an aging population and a healthcare system that's getting bogged down with type 2 diabetes symptoms, chronic health conditions such as heart disease, strokes, and COPD is a big one, sleep apnea, and high blood pressure. What a waste. Did you know that about 85% of those chronic conditions can be prevented through diet and lifestyle? Well, that's what I'm here to teach you. So I'm Judy Green from Ron Green Wellness Coaching, helping you turn over a new leaf through optimal nutrition, healthy habits, and a positive state of mind. So if you're eating optimal nutrition, but are also spraying, rubbing, washing with, and exposing your largest organ, your skin, to harsh chemicals, you are doing it wrong. If your skincare and home environment are free from harsh chemicals, but you are not eating optimal nutrition, you're also doing it wrong. You have to have both sides of the coin. So what exactly is optimal nutrition? You're probably thinking, Judy, there is no one-size-fits-all nutrition. You know, scientists have tried to say that everybody should be eating the same amount of calories or the same foods for a long time, and we know that that is just not true. Each person's metabolism is different. Each person's preference is different. Everything about the digestive process and the assimilation of nutrients is different in each individual. I would even go so far as to say that there are as many perfect diets on the planet as there are people. Now, I just want to point out, when I use the word diet, I am not talking about a short-term fix to try to lose a few inches to get into an outfit. I am talking by the definition of diet, which is the foods that one habitually eats. So yes, in looking at a survey of all the most common and efficient and effective ways of eating, there are a lot of commonalities. There are things that they share that I believe is what leads to them being effective for people. So this is what optimal nutrition is. This is taking all of that common information down into an easy to understand form that is in fact your baseline. So this is where you need to be. If you're in a standard American diet, this is what you need to be working towards. Once you get to this point, then you can start customizing for your specific needs. That's what I mean by optimal nutrition. So I do want you to understand that these classes are judgment-free zones. You know, I love this quote by Maya Angelou. She says, "You do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better." So there's no sense beating yourself up for things you didn't know. And you will be learning a lot of information in this course that may be new to you. So in general, there are 3 levels of diets. Mark David from the Psychology of Eating really classifies diets into 3 separate categories, and I do go into more detail in this in the Nutritional Boot Camp, but on a high level, this is his definition. A therapeutic diet is specifically designed to treat or heal a disease or medical symptom. So if you have type 2 diabetes and you'd like to reverse your symptoms and get off your medication, then you definitely need to be looking at a diet in the therapeutic category. So diabetes, cancer, Crohn's, irritable bowel syndrome, cardiovascular, high blood pressure, all of these chronic illnesses can be helped, symptoms drastically reduced or reversed with the proper diet and lifestyle. These therapeutic diets may not continue to be effective once the body has healed or the symptoms abate. So they are not necessarily something that will work long term for you. For instance, when I was eliminating cancer from my body, I chose to do a green feast, which was a everything was blended, very high alkaline, everything live, and that did the job in an amazingly short amount of time. However, it was not something that was going to be sustainable, especially with an all-liquid diet. I tell you, by the end of the second week, I was ready to chew my own arm off. I hadn't realized how much I needed that tactile mouthfeel of chewing something. So there's a lot of things that drive our choices in food. So these therapeutic diets are highly effective, but they're not necessarily going to be something that will be sustainable long term. Another good obvious example is extended fasting, which can do some amazing things in terms of reversing disease, but you can't extended fast forever. You will eventually use up all your body fat stores, and then you're going to be a very sick puppy, and we don't want that. So those are good definitions of therapeutic level of diets. Now, when people talk about the 80-20 rule, eat healthy foods 80% of the time, and 20% of the time you have your treats and have your birthday cake and that ice cream in the summer and that sort of thing, they're really talking about a maintenance diet. They should still be healthy, wholesome, rich foods, and the program that I'm explaining in this video is in this category. Optimal nutrition would be a maintenance program, and you would be constantly choosing over time what your level or degree of compliance is, depending on your circumstances. So it's a lot more flexible because we live in the world. We don't live in isolation, and food is a huge part of the human condition. And then the experimental category is kind of fun because as eaters, we're essentially saying, let's try this. I've never been on this one before. Stick with it for a while and see what happens. So you're kind of biohacking. You're seeing, doing a little experiment with an N of 1, yourself being the only participant in the study, as it were, and seeing what happens. So elimination diets are really good for this because you are taking foods out of your diet that are known to be problematic in the general population. Then when you add them back in, you see what your responses are to them, and you gather a whole lot of information. I would also add in diets that are new to the world. They don't have a lot of peer-reviewed studies. There hasn't been a lot of science behind them yet. So you might try them and see if it works for you in the short term. But again, they would not be a long-term diet that would give you all the nourishment you need. You'd be looking at something like optimal nutrition in that maintenance category of diet. So what is optimal nutrition? Well, number one, it is always best to get your nutrients from whole food. Fresh, whole, organic when possible, or grown with organic or permaculture principles. They don't always get to be certified. Organic certification is prohibitively expensive for many farmers, and there are people who are doing and growing on biodynamic farms that are not certified, and yet the quality of the produce coming from that growing method is far more full and rich of nutrients than anything that's conventionally farmed. So we're looking for food that's providing our body with the nutrients they need in the proportions and combinations needed for optimal health. So that is not just certain foods, but in a good variety and combination and in proportions that you need for optimal health. So number one, yes, I'm going to rag on sugar. You already knew this one. You can't tell me you didn't. So when I say reduce or eliminate white, highly processed sugar, if you are on a standard American diet and you are eating like hundreds of grams of sugar a day, then I want you to start by reducing it. To eliminate immediately may throw you into withdrawal symptoms, and you could get feel very sick. So what I really want you to do is totally eliminate white highly processed sugar. So when I say reduce or eliminate, think of it as a sliding scale. Where you are, the next step is to reduce and then to eliminate. So look at where you are on that scale and always be trying to move towards that elimination of the white highly processed sugar. And the reason for that is it has no nutritional benefits whatsoever. It is biologically active in that it makes physiological changes in your body when you eat it. In fact, if it were to come on the market now, it would not be allowed in our food, but because we've had it in our food for so long, it's been grandfathered in. So I want you to look at upgrading to small portions of organic raw cane sugar is the next step. Maple syrup is a little bit better. Raw, local, unpasteurized honey is a little bit better, or molasses, organic molasses. Now, blackstrap molasses is higher in nutrients and minerals. However, it is very bitter. So unless a recipe actually asks and calls for specifically blackstrap molasses, you're going to want to stick with a nice organic molasses. Now, what about the sugar or calorie-free options? There's a lot of chemicals and chemical or sugar alcohols on the market now, like xylitol and erythritol and ones like that, maltitol. They can have varying degrees of problems in your digestive system. Some of them will give you constipations, other people will get diarrhea. They don't have calories, or not as many calories. They're not digested or really processed in our bodies very well, and I highly recommend just steering clear of them. So the only real non-calorie sweeteners that I recommend is pure stevia, and that you're going to get in the health food section, not in the center aisles with the sugar. The sugar companies are branding stevia now as a sugar substitute, but they mix it with all sorts of other things. So you may end up saying big bold letters of stevia on the box. However, when you look at the ingredient list and you look at the actual sugar or carbs in the when you're reading the labels, you're going to find that there are actually calories there, or it has sugar alcohols. So you want something that is just stevia. There's a brand called Pure Leaf Stevia, which is my personal favorite, but you may or may not have access to that depending on where you are in the world. Monk fruit, I'm told, is a fabulous sweetener. It comes, well, just like stevia, it comes from a plant. Monk fruit comes from a plant. Unfortunately, it is not readily available in my area, and it is prohibitively expensive. So I have not found it where it hasn't been added to these cheaper sugar alcohols, which I refuse to consume. So I have not personally tried it. Now, xylitol originally came from birch trees, and so it was actually a healthier option. Now it's being created chemically from corn. So if you have corn allergies, you want to stay away from xylitol. Also, if you have dogs, you don't want to have xylitol, because dogs are, it's deadly to dogs. Xylitol is just as your dark chocolate is as well. So you want to be really, really careful. Don't put it in the garbage for like a half-eaten muffin that's been sweetened with xylitol, where your or the neighbor's dogs can get at it. So just be very, very cautious. You don't want to have a tragedy and lose a family pet over a sweetener. So stevia, you don't have that issue. The rule of thumb is that people complain that stevia has an aftertaste. If you taste an aftertaste, you're using far too much of it. Stevia is highly, 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 highly concentrated, like 400 times as sweet as sugar. So we're talking with liquid stevia, the pure leaf, a couple drops in your tea or your coffee will be more than enough stevia for you. So go drop by drop, and until you find the level that works for you, that gives you a little bit of sweetness without that aftertaste. So the next step is reducing or eliminating white, highly processed flour. So what do I mean by that? Remember that continuum. The white highly processed flour has no nutritional benefit left to it. Even if it is fortified, it's just not your good choice. And it's going to, just like sugar, it will raise your blood sugar and cause problems with insulin. So I really want you to eliminate white highly processed flour. But if you really can't, then organic white unbleached flour is a good start. Organic whole wheat flour is the next step. Multigrain. You really have to be careful though if you're buying a product that says whole wheat. If you look at the ingredient list, enriched flour is often the first item on that ingredient list, which means that that's white flour. So just be really careful about what is actually in your food by reading those ingredient lists. Multigrain, the same issue. It often is white flour with a few multigrains added. Your better choice is something called einkorn. Einkorn flour is a variety of grain that is what our modern wheat was hybridized from. So it's like the grandfather grain. Einkorn has just a small number of chromosomes. It doesn't have the like 24 or something crazy that our new wheat has. Its protein is, the gluten protein is a protein that our bodies can actually digest. We evolved digesting this protein after thousands of years. And it is not, especially if you get organic, you won't have the issue with it being sprayed with glyphosate. So it is a much better choice. People who are gluten intolerant will often be able to handle einkorn, which does have some gluten in it, but it's an older version of gluten that's not as inflammatory, where they haven't been able to handle anything with modern wheat. Fermenting or souring your grains are always a good choice because that partially digests them, or sprouting your grains. That's another option as well. It helps to use natural enzymes and lactobacillus in our environment to help almost pre-digest the grains to make it easier for us to be able to digest them. The hybridized wheat is a real problem. I mentioned the chromosomes. It's very interesting. Wheat, like, you know, human beings, when you have the sperm and the egg come together, the resulting child will have half their chromosomes from each parent. Wheat doesn't work that way. So if you have two different versions of wheat or two different breeds of wheat, you will have one that has perhaps 8 chromosomes. You may have another one that's got 12 chromosomes. The resulting hybrid will actually add those together and you'll end up with 20 chromosomes. So of course that changes the structure of the wheat and how it interacts with the cells in our body and how we digest it. So the hybridized wheat has been hybridized so that it didn't get, wasn't so easily taken out by drought or hailstorms and that sort of thing. And I understand for farmers, you know, that's a lot of risk that they undertake, and I understand why they're doing that, but it wasn't, they weren't looking at the nutrition or the absorbability of the resulting food when they were making those decisions. So go back to einkorn or eliminate wheat from your diet entirely. And there is a school of thought that it's not even the gluten. Other than if you're celiac or Crohn's, those are definite gluten allergies. But if you are gluten intolerant, it may not be the gluten. It might be the glyphosate. Glyphosate is an herbicide that is routinely sprayed on wheat fields and other produce as well, mostly grains, that makes it possible for the farmers to, it hardens off the wheats, which means that it makes it all come ripe all at the same time. And that means that, and it gets rid of all of the weeds. So the farmers get a higher yield and they get everything being harvested at once. So it is very good for the farmers, but not good for us because you get this big blast of glyphosate, which doesn't wash off and is now right on the outside in heavy doses of your grain kernels that are now going to be ground into flour. So this is definitely not a good thing. They're finding glyphosate in the cord blood of babies now, and in pretty much everything. Every day there's a new news article that it's been found in more and more of our food that it was never sprayed on. So you always have cross-contamination happening as well. So the next reduce or eliminate is the white highly processed rice and upgrade to small portions of. Okay, so what's the problem with rice? Huge numbers of the population on the planet live on a diet that's very high in rice. The problem is with the processing. We're always processing things so that we can eat it faster. The jasmine rice is actually a better choice of rice. Parboiled rice is even better. Brown rice has lots of fiber that slows down that absorption of the starch. Wild rice is actually seeds. It's not really a rice, but we call it wild rice in Canada, and that's a good choice. Then there's grain-like seeds, and these are actually seeds, not grains. Millet, quinoa, and bulgur, and those are called ancient grains, and those are better choices as well. The biggest problem is with grains in general is that you're processing them. So if you look at oatmeal, for instance, if you look at Irish oatmeal, it is basically the oats are just have a couple cuts in them, and they're big chunks of oats. The next processed is Scottish oatmeal, and it's been chopped up a little bit more. And then you have rolled oats, and then you have steamed oats, and then you have instant oats that have been steamed, and they're even chopped tiny. So you get to a point that it takes you 45 minutes to cook the grain down to where you can put hot water in your mug and your grain is cooked. So the faster your grain cooks, the faster it's going to go to sugar in your blood. And because we're taking out the fiber, we're taking out anything that is going to help or going to slow down that absorption. So that's a good rule of thumb, is that the faster the grain cooks, the worse it is for you. So you want to be as full of fiber and full of nutrients as you can get if you're going to continue to eat grains. But the seed-like grains, the seeds are fabulous. So millet, quinoa, bulgur, those are fabulous choices, and they cook up very much like rice. So I do encourage you to try those if you never have before. And another reduce or eliminate. We're almost done the reduce or eliminate. Reduce or eliminate the white highly processed salt. This was actually the very first change our family made because it was an easy one. We got rid of the highly processed white table salt that has the minerals stripped out of it. It's chemically cleaned and bleached, and then it has anti-caking additives added back into it, and often has sugar added in order to stabilize the iodine that is added to supplement, or to, pardon me, to not supplement, but to fortify the salt. So we are much better off with a natural or Celtic or Himalayan sea salt. Also, herbs and spices reduce your need for any kind of salt. And sea vegetables such as dulse, like in Nova Scotia, we're very, very lucky. We have a number of sea vegetables and plants companies that produce them here, and we can get a nice, from Fundy Dulse, we can get a combination of sea vegetables that are all in a kind of a shaker form, and that gives us lots of iodine, lots of minerals, very little of the sodium, so it's a good balance between the two. The next reduce or eliminate is vegetable oil, corn oil, canola oil, and especially any deep frying oil. So these are all of the oils that we basically grew up with. You know, the shortening that we use in baking, you can swap out coconut oil for that. Originally, vegetable oil used to be corn oil, but now it's mostly made from the soybeans, so it is often genetically modified. Canola is also genetically modified, and very, very inflammatory oils. They increase systemic inflammation throughout your body, so you want to be avoiding those oils. and upgrading to extra virgin olive oil. That gets used, not heated. That is an oil that you would be putting in a salad dressing or drizzling on the top of a hummus or on a nice blended soup. Camelina oil is a Canadian oil, which is fabulous, and it has a high smoke point, so it can pretty much be used right across the spectrum of heat. Avocado oil is a nice oil that doesn't have a strong flavor. It is a very good oil to, it has a higher smoke point as well, and it can be used in many things. And then extra virgin coconut oil is not as good at high temperatures. You'd want to have a coconut oil that's not extra virgin for that. And whole food fats, don't be afraid of healthy fats like avocados and your nuts and seeds. But a key here is never to let any oil smoke. Doesn't matter if you start with the best and healthiest oil. If you allow it to smoke, you have denatured that oil. It now is more like a trans fat, and your body has a very hard time processing it, and it will lead to systemic inflammation, which leads to chronic illness. And this is one of the reasons that deep frying is not a good idea, because you're using the same oil over and over, and every time it's heated, you lower that smoke point, because every time it's heated, the chemical structure of the oil changes, and it can't get up to that high heat again. And so that's one of the reasons you don't want to deep fry. If you want to fry, pan fry once, and then the oil is done. Or get an air fryer. Air fryers are actually very efficient and very effective. So the next reduce or eliminate is dairy products. They are one of the top allergens, and if you're doing an elimination diet, they'll be one of the first ones to remove from your diet. And it's very interesting. Human beings are the only creatures on the planet that drink the milk of another species, and we are the only creatures on the planet that drink milk after the age of weaning. In addition, the vast majority of human beings, 60% or more, do not produce sufficient enzymes to digest milk after the age of weaning. So it's not surprising that many of us have low-grade inflammation because we're not digesting dairy products very well. So some good substitutions are non-dairy products, natural ones, such as coconut milk and homemade nuts and grain milks. And pretty much any nut or grain you can make into a milk. I recommend them homemade, very easy, water and your nut or seed, and it's about a 1-to-4 ratio. So say 1 cup of water to a 1/4 cup of grain, blend it all up. If it is a nut like an almond that has the dark outer layer of it, you may want to strain it through a sieve or a cheesecloth, but something like macadamia nuts or cashews are soft enough that, and especially if you have a good blender like a Vitamix or a Blendtec, you don't even need to strain it. I actually like making my my non-dairy milks in my juicer because it strains it all ready for me all at once. I just add the grains in the water all at once, and it does all the hard work for me. And then I've got these great the leftovers from the nut and seeds that I can use and make crackers, which really works well. Another thing to keep in mind is that butter is a much better option than margarine. There's no need to be eating margarine. It's very inflammatory, not a good choice. If possible, choose grass-fed, unsalted, and undyed butter. A little bit of butter is much better for you than margarine. I also make something called Better Butter, and it's simple by combining 2/3 of a cup of extra virgin coconut oil and 1/3 of a cup of EVOO or extra virgin olive oil and sea salt to taste. And as that's solidifying in your fridge, I just stir it every once in a while to distribute the sea salt throughout it. That is a perfectly spreadable, lovely substitute for either butter or margarine with a whole lot more health benefits. So on to the big one, reduce or eliminate red meat. And finally, the Canada Food Guide agrees with me on this. You can try meatless Mondays. If you choose to eat meat, our the human beings have evolved on eating wild game meat and naturally farmed and husbanded uh, animals for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. If there was something inherently wrong with eating that meat, we would not have survived as a species. I really believe that the problem is what we've been doing in the last 50 to 100 years. What we do to our food is what's causing the problem, not the food itself. So what I recommend that you do is cut down, because we don't need near as much protein as the popular media would have us believe. Only about 10% of your calories should come from protein, all sources, and you do get protein, amino acids, the building blocks of protein, from plant-based foods as well. It is better to choose wild or pasture-raised and finished organic meats and wild-caught fish from a sustainable fishery. Our fisheries are in such bad shape right now, and we have such problem with pollution in our oceans as well. So choosing a primarily plant-based diet is always best. Avoid the confined animal feeding operations or any food that's coming from a feedlot or that sort of thing. And part of the problem is that these animals are being raised in very tight quarters. They're under high stress circumstances. They're being fed food, mostly GMO, soy and corn. So they're eating food that is not their natural food. They're ruminants. Their natural food is grasses, and they're not getting any of those. In some cases, they've been being fed like the leftover gummy bears that are full of gelatin from candy making places, because it makes the fat in the meat taste better. But when you add all of that together, the stress hormones that are in the meat, then you add in antibiotics, because they often have to have prophylactic antibiotics in order to prevent disease because of the confined conditions. And you may end up with some animals having growth hormone. It's just a really bad situation for the animals, and the meat that comes out of them is not good. All of those hormones are coming into our bodies, and all of those antibiotics leading to or contributing to antibiotic resistance. So if you can reduce or eliminate as possible. I understand not everybody can afford organic meats. I can't afford it all the time either. So oftentimes I will just choose not even to have meat every day, and that's okay. You don't need meat every day. You get protein from other plant sources as well. So just open your mind a little on this one, and it took me a long time before I started to peek through that the butcher house door, as it were. I did not want to really see what was going on with those animals, and that is a decision and a path you need to make on your own. But from a purely nutritional point of view, look at the hormones, look at what's going into the animals in that circumstance, and make your decisions wisely. So the next is to eliminate genetically modified organisms, or GMO. Now, I'm a scientist. I have a master's degree. I love science. However, I have serious problems when they're using a scientific method like gene splicing to combine creatures or genes from creatures that are two completely different species. This just doesn't happen in nature. I have to believe there's a reason it doesn't happen in nature. And because it doesn't happen in nature, we have no idea what will happen when these animals who are genetically modified, such as salmon, which is the genes from a salmon and the genes from an eel that make the salmon voraciously hungry so that it grows a lot faster and a lot larger than the parent salmon. So when these salmon get out into the ecosystem, as they will, there hasn't been a fish farm yet built that hasn't had fish escape from it. When that happens, what is going to happen? My questions are, what is going to happen to the native species of salmon? What's going to happen when these species crossbreed? Because they will. This is what animals do in the wild. What is going to happen to the ecosystem? I have serious concerns with that. So when you're splicing between two different species, and the companies that are doing this are not testing, they are self-reporting. They have patents on their genes and on their technology that prohibit any independent studies from ever happening. on these ways of doing it. So it's a serious problem. In agriculture, it also genetically modified organisms are modified to be able to withstand heavy doses of glyphosate and other herbicides, so that they and other pesticides, and some are even modified so that they are themselves a pesticide. And so when you eat that food, and I believe it's a soybean, a Roundup Ready soybean, I could have that wrong, but there is one of them that creates its own um, bacteria that is a pesticide, and it is patented as a pesticide. So when we eat that, there have been tests on people's stomach microbiome, and it has found that that pesticide is being replicated within people's stomachs. So there's some really serious things going on that and they're not testing for them. So you only get the anecdotal circumstances, which isn't strong in science. However, it should be enough to be raising some alarm bells. So whenever the science is cloudy, so we don't know what these are doing to our bodies and environment, and with Monsanto blocking scientists from investigating due to their patent laws, that raises red flags for me. And the fact that they're spending billions of dollars to stop us from labeling foods as genetically modified, and they know that we won't eat them if they're labeled as genetically modified. So I really take offense at being part of a science experiment I didn't sign up for. So yay! That was the last of the reduce or eliminate. And remember what I said about reducing or eliminate? Depends on where you are. If you are eating a horrible standard American diet, high in all the bad stuff, yeah, you got to start with reducing. But if you're already cleaning up your diet, then you want to work towards eliminating those items for the most part. Now we get on to increasing. Yay! Get to increase your consumption of the following: leafy greens, vegetables, sprouts, and microgreens, fruit, whole, not juiced. The problem with juiced fruit is you're removing the fiber. When you remove the fiber, you're left mostly with fructose, which is very problematic in our bodies, and it will raise blood sugar like crazy. And so the whole fruits are fabulous, but we want to avoid the juices. Legumes, lentils, and beans. If you haven't experimented with all sorts of fun stuff with the different lentils, I recommend you do. If you've never eaten lentils and beans before, do make sure that they are either like cooked in a pressure cooker and have been soaked and rinsed really well before cooking, because beans and lentils have enzyme inhibitors that because they're seeds. So in nature, the seeds have enzyme inhibitors so that they don't sprout until the conditions are good for them to grow. So we have to soak our lentils and beans before we cook them to get rid of those enzyme inhibitors. You soak them and you rinse and you throw away that rinsed water. And if that is not done, that often is what is causing the flatulence, the gassiness that people report when they eat beans and lentils. So if you treat them properly and prepare them properly, you're going to have a lot less problem with that. They're also high in fiber, and if you've been eating a diet that is not high in fiber, you need to add fiber gradually. If you add a whole bunch of fiber all at once, you're going to be very uncomfortable. So you want to be gentle with your body and make these changes slowly. Nuts and seeds. Absolutely, they're wonderful whole food fats, lots of wonderful fat-soluble vitamins, and very filling. They really help with satiety, making you feel full. In fact, nuts and seeds should actually be eaten with your meal, not as a snack. It's too easy to overeat them as a snack. You want to eat them with your meal to help you feel very full. Another thing that you can be increasing your consumption of is wild fermented foods, such as sourdough, homemade yogurt, or just plain yogurt in the store. And all it should say on the ingredient list is milk and bacterial cultures. There should be nothing else. The minute that you add anything like fruit or sugar to a yogurt, it kills the bacteria, and the benefit is now gone. So while milk by itself is not a good choice, yogurt has been partially digested for you, and the proteins have changed because of that fermentation. So sometimes people who have problems with dairy don't have problems with yogurt, especially if you make it homemade. It's actually not difficult to make in your slow cooker at home. Sauerkraut is easy to make at home as well, and it's just cabbage and salt in the right proportions. And the salt inhibits the pathogenic or the bad bacteria and allows the lacto-fermenting bacteria that's available and all around us to take over and make that very distinctive sauerkraut taste. Kimchi is a traditional fermented vegetable. Pickles, I've made both dill and beet pickles in a lacto-fermented formula, and they work wonderful. Kombucha is another wonderful source of probiotics and fermentation, and that's a lovely beverage that you can make on your own as well and control the amount of sugar that's in it. Okay, the next slide is in our series of adding more into the diet is drinking more water. So most of us in North America are chronically dehydrated. There have never been any studies that say definitively how much water we should drink. Each person is going to be quite unique. It used to say 8 glasses of water a day, but a 250-pound man and a 120-pound woman are not going to have the same needs of water. Also, somebody who's eating lots of fresh leafy greens and fresh fruits and vegetables are going to be getting a fair amount of water from their food versus somebody who is eating dried carbohydrates and crackers and bread and that sort of thing. So you really can't compare that way. A rough goal that I rather like is looking at your body weights. You stand on the scale and you see how many pounds you weigh, and you divide that in 2. So if you're 140 pounds, you divide that by 2, which is 70, and that's roughly how many ounces of water you should be trying to get per day. Do keep in mind that coffee and black tea do actually act as diuretics. And if you are doing intermittent fasting or reducing your carbs on like a ketogenic diet, you will actually be losing more body water, and you will need to be replacing that and making sure you've got a balance of electrolytes there as well. Adding fresh lemon juice is always a good way to add some flavor to your water and actually get some nutrition there as well. You can also infuse your water with things like sliced strawberries, cucumber. Those are really nice choices just to add a little bit of flavor to your water, especially if you're someone who's not used to drinking water and doesn't really like the taste of it or the lack of taste of it. But I would stay away from any of those little chemical drops that you put in your water to make them taste better. Those tend to be artificial colors, artificial flavors, and artificial sweeteners, none of which you really need in your body. It just adds to your toxic load. The next step is, it's a tip, because we need something called antioxidants. Antioxidants really only come from plants, and nature's really smart. It's given us a really easy way to know, and we're attracted to, brightly colored foods. So brightly colored foods contain those antioxidants, and there's about 5 colors that you want to be really trying to get on every plate. So oftentimes we'll have some of those little baby cherries and cucumbers, or we can slice them up and pop them on our plate just to round out the colors that we have from whatever we're eating that day, to try to get those 5 colors on our plate at each meal. 80% of Canadians do not eat enough antioxidant and phytonutrient-rich fruits and vegetables. And the antioxidants are critical for combating free radicals. And the free radicals are what basically causes aging in our bodies, the degradation of the cells. And if we have enough antioxidants, then it buffers that free radical action that happens just through normal metabolism and living our lives. And so lots of antioxidants are really, really important. I like this graphic because it's simple. It kind of shows you just the colors. Go for the colors. Those white fruits and vegetables are really critical, especially the vegetables like cauliflower, onions, mushrooms. Those are sulfur-rich foods. Turn up that sort of thing, very sulfur-rich foods, and we don't tend to get enough of those in our diet. The darker the color, the more rich in antioxidants the produce is. So always look for those bright, vibrant colors. So the next step is really eating clean. And this is drastically reducing the amount of processed food in boxes, packages, and cans. You want to read your ingredient list. Though the items listed are in order of the highest volume to the lowest. So you don't want to see sugar in the first position, and you don't want to see multiple versions of sugar in that list, because in combination they may actually mean that sugar should be the first one in the list. That's one of the ways that manufacturers kind of trick us a little bit, and learn to read your nutrition label about how many grams of sugar or carbohydrate is in that packaged product as well. So in general, if you can't pronounce it, don't eat it. Now there are some exceptions, such as maca, matcha, acai, quinoa, and goji. I have to tell you, the first time that I went into a health food store, I had been reading about quinoa. Now, I had never heard anybody pronounce quinoa, and so I was pronouncing it phonetically, and this lovely young lady, maybe 16 years old, at the health food store, had a hard time keeping a straight face, but she was very, very gentle with me when I went in and I asked where they kept the quinoa. It's not quinoa, as I now know, it's called quinoa. The next thing that you can do is actually not a food, but it's learning to plan and cook meals from scratch at home. We've gotten into the habit in North America of fast food, and the fast food is not serving us well. We know it's not healthy for us, but it is fast, it's quick, and it stops us from being hungry. But with just a little bit of work and meal planning at home, and sometimes doing meal prep on a Sunday afternoon, or whatever your day off is, cook once, eat several times. So you plan the use of your leftovers and assemble or just heat up on busy days. You know, I love smoothies. I can just throw in a whole bunch of different things really quick, and I use a smoothie formula that works really well for me. And things like Buddha bowls or Nourish bowls, where you have a grain, you have leafy greens, you have vegetable, and maybe some nuts and seeds and a protein, and drizzle a Nourish dressing over top of that. And that's very nice because you can have all of those already pre-cooked, left over from the quinoa that you had with you know, your meal the night before, and just assemble very quickly and have a lovely, healthy meal, and a lot faster than it would actually take you to go through the drive-through. And we also have to get away from thinking that we need like 4-course meals at every meal. Sometimes just a simpler meal throughout the week is the way to go. We used to eat something called farmer's plates, and that was just a selection of cold vegetables and fruits and meats and cheeses and crackers and that sort of thing. So we don't always have to have an all singing, all dancing Sunday dinner. So one of the best ways to eat clean is to follow the environmental working groups Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. They survey the produce every year and will put out new lists. This is the 2018 version. 2019 hadn't come out at the time of recording this class. But the ewg.org is a great place to go for this. And what you're looking at is the Dirty Dozen are the top 12 produce that contain very, very high levels of herbicides and pesticides that are hard to wash off. So strawberries are very difficult to grow without herbicides and pesticides. Spinach, nectarines, apples, grapes, peaches, cherries, pears, tomatoes, celery, potatoes, sweet bell peppers. So these are the items that you really should spend your money on and get organic when possible. The Clean 15 are the top 15 that have the lowest amounts of pesticide and herbicide residue. So these items you can generally get non-organic and not worry about the spraying. So there are things like that have like pineapples or sweet corn, where you're taking that whole outer layer off, and you're not going to have as much contamination. The next step is to eliminate exposure to xenotoxins in your environment. Xenotoxins are toxins that affect they're in your environment, and they affect your body. Some of these are endocrine disruptors, so they disrupt the production and operation of hormones in your body, and have been thought to be contributing to lower birth rates, lower sperm counts, infertility all around, all sorts of things. So very important to be eliminating them. Our skin is our largest organ, and we absorb things through the skin very, very quickly. If you do not believe me, cut up a slice of fresh garlic and put it on the bottom of your foot, a bare foot, and just count how many minutes it takes before you can taste that garlic in your mouth. That's how quickly we absorb through our skin. So it's really, really important to eliminate synthetic fragrances and use only the highest quality essential oils, such as those from Young Living. Also to eliminate products that have all of those toxic chemicals. You can choose health promoting products from a company that you trust and believe in, and there are some good companies out there. I love Young Living because I can get everything I need in one place. So Young Living's Thieves line is my preferred cleaning products. So you can see you can get body care, shampoos, face cleansing. We now have makeup, mineral makeup, the Thieves line of personal care, the Thieves line of home cleaning products, and nutritional supplements, and much, much more. So you want to be getting that out of your all of the toxins by choosing products that are naturally made and sustainable and are accountable to you, the purchaser, for the quality. The next two are lifestyle issues. One is to manage stress. We tend to be in a state of chronic stress. Stress is designed to keep us safe, running away from, say, a saber-toothed tiger. So fast, acute moments of stress is what our bodies are used to dealing with, not sustained secretion of the stress hormones. And this is one of the reasons that we are getting sicker and sicker all the time. So one of the ways to manage stress is to take little breaks throughout the day, enjoy fresh air and sunshine whenever possible. Studies show that even 30 minutes in nature daily is as beneficial as some treatments for depression. I like to use an essential oil such as Stress Away that really helps to minimize my stress reaction. And move your body daily for at least 20 minutes. It can be 5 minutes at a time. It doesn't have to be 2 hours at the gym. You know, just turn up the music and dance like no one's watching. So this is what your plate will look like. And what I absolutely love about this is I've been working on optimal nutrition for close to 6 years. And it will continue to evolve as I continue to look at different eating programs and the science that comes out in nutrition every year. And the plate you see in front of you is what I have been saying for 6 years we should be eating in terms of optimal nutrition. Half your plate with produce, fruits and vegetables, a quarter of your plate your grains and starches, and a quarter of your plate proteins and fats. And this is the plate for the new Canada Food Guide. I am ecstatic. So there are still some issues with the details of the new Canada Food Guide. However, I think they've made leaps and bounds. And making water your drink of choice rather than milk or juice is a huge step, especially for children. So at this point, if I was doing this class live, I would be taking questions. If you have questions, please, you'll be watching this on YouTube, so please put your questions down below and I will monitor them. As long as everyone behaves themselves and it doesn't become a pain in my butt, I will not turn off the comments. But what I want you to take away is that you can't pour from an empty cup. You have to take care of yourself first and not feel guilty about it. You are in fact doing more for your family by looking after yourself so you have the energy to look after them than if you just motor through and end up being sick with a chronic illness and are not able to look after yourself or them in the future. So I hope you've enjoyed this bonus. Optimal nutrition is always evolving, and it is the baseline. As I said, we'll be looking at including it as the baseline in green keto and other options in the future. So I want to thank you for continuing this journey with me, and I'll see you next time. Until then, keeping it raw and green.